I am Vinnie Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry. I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent at the beginning of this process, but hang in there. Before long, you will be lean and mean, guaranteed. It's the Friday show, and that's when we bring someone in with way, way, way more knowledge than what I have. And today, the person that we're going to bring in is a guy that's been on the show several times. I've actually been on the same stage with this guy whenever he's in the United States. He's always a barrel of laughs, and he always has a ton of knowledge. I want to say he came to prominence for the first time when he did a video that kind of shocked the world when it comes to cholesterol. And if I remember right, it was called the Cholesterol Conundrum. He'll correct me if I'm wrong about that. But at any rate, let's bring him on. I'm talking about my good friend, Ivor Cummins. How you doing, Ivor?
Hey, Vinny, doing great.
I'm right? It was called the Cholesterol Conundrum.
Yeah, it was actually. And I did the metabolic syndrome first after all my research. But it was the cholesterol conundrum on YouTube that really took off. And in fact, within 2 days, Dr. Mike Eads, Protein Power, wrote a big email to me congratulating me. And we struck up a huge friendship. But I was amazed that a famous author of 4 million books sold would write to me within a day or two of putting this video on YouTube. But yeah, it made a mark.
Now, I want to be very clear because everyone always is, well, is this guy a scientist? Yes, he is, but he didn't come from that world, right? I always put you in that same boat with Dave Feldman. The first thing people want to say about both of you guys, they'll go, well, they're not doctors. Well, fuck, if doctors had figured it out, you guys wouldn't have had to have come along. You guys are just guys that can look at data and in a way, no one's paying you to look at data, right? You're not someone that's being paid to do this. You took the data, you went through it, and you figured this out. Go down that road, because I don't know if you realize this, Ivor, but I pick up new audience all the time. And I go on these big shows and everything, and then I get their audience. So explain where you came from and how you came across the whole thing, if you will.
Okay. Whoa. I'll try and keep it I'll keep it snappy. So basically, as it happens, I have a biochemical engineering degree originally. And I did, the chemistry of life, Professor Rose, all the biochemistry, DNA, genetics, cellular biochemistry. So I did do all of that, in fairness. But then I mostly, after 5 years in medical device, R&D, I mostly got into high volume consumer devices. So I kind of moved away from my biochemical roots. But then after 20 years leading in complex problem solving, and that involves all branches of science, and that's something people should understand, that people like me who are integrators, I have staff under me that focus on any or all branches of science to solve complex physics, chemistry, etc. problems. So I have to kind of get to know all the sciences and use all the experts and integrate the picture. So I'm kind of perfectly placed to answer questions about cholesterol because I'm independent and it's my specialty. So the reason I got into it, though, was I got some blood tests. The doctor, medical doctor, I questioned why 3 of the values in standard blood tests. So I figured this doctor would know all about them because this is tools of their trade, right? Cholesterol, ferritin, and GGT. And we won't get into what they were, but I could see they were really high. They're really high. So I immediately went into my technical solving mode and I asked, what are the impacts of these on longevity or, morbidity or mortality risk? And B, how do I resolve them? How do I make them lower? I expected the doctor to know. And I was shocked when I got very weak answers, vague stuff. Eat more whole grains, maybe. Eat less fat, like, food pyramid stuff.
Right.
And then I went to another doctor, more senior one, connected to, and same problem. And then I went to a teaching professor of medicine who I was connected to through the family. Teaching professor, multiple published. And similarly, they gave some ideas, but they didn't convince me. And when I checked out these things, it turned out it wasn't any of those things. So I said, right, what do I do? What I've done all my career. I went to PubMed, ResearchGate, I had corporate logons to access the full history, 100 years of human published research, and I followed up these markers. And within a couple of days, I was engrossed. And within another week or two, I realized insulin resistance was the biggest problem in the world, and that was the problem I had, which no doctor had mentioned. And I discovered cholesterol was completely misleading, and we've been lied to for 50 years. So I just got into it so much, and I could not believe that the whole medical system and nutritional education system was completely missing the big problem and focusing mostly on nonsense. Shocking.
Well, I think it's interesting when you say you ended up at a teaching professor and he had the same answer. In fact, he's the guy that was giving the answer to the guy that you went to first, because he was a teaching professor. That's the thing. People always go, well, how can all these guys be wrong? It's like, because they're all in the same echo. I hate to use the term echo chamber because it means something else now politically, because everybody gets in their own echo chamber of, hey, we believe this, and we're going to just go in a room where everyone says the same thing. But isn't that what medicine was doing anyway? Or do I have that wrong? You answer. Don't let me put words in your mouth. Let's not be another echo chamber here. Let's be frank about it.
Yeah, well, no, absolutely, Vinny. No, it's very fair. It's a form, shall we say, of echo chamber. And essentially, the world and academia, there's no conspiracy theory here. It wasn't that industry or the pharmaceutical industry or the food industry created the cholesterol kind of and fat confusing nonsense that the world went with 50 years ago. It was actually academics who did. And the likes of Ancel Keyes, the fish physiologist who became hugely influential. He was a very political guy, got into the American Heart Association, did the studies that appeared to show that fat was bad. But it was kind of academia that got it wrong. And then it got established. And I think then what happened was the food industry realized that academia was handing them a golden goose, because academia was actually saying, and think how crazy this is, the academics were actually saying that the real natural foods like meat, fish, and eggs, well, meat and eggs mainly, were actually bad. But what was good were factory seed oils and vegetable oils and cheap whole grains, which are ultra low cost for the food industry, and they have long shelf life. So academics were handing the food industry a golden goose. So then the food industry, of course, says, great. And over the decades, the food industry realized we got to make sure that this idea doesn't change. So they funded nutrition science, they funded medical education. Pharmaceutical industry realized all of these whole grains and vegetable oils are driving loads of cardiac disease, which is creating a huge market for us. So they began to fund medical education as well. And to be honest, it was just capitalism working. I mean, it seems nasty, but there was no real conspiracy. And exactly what you said, after 50 years of funding, right, bad science, it's just everyone is taught it and everyone believes it. That's it.
Yeah. Look, I couldn't agree more. As you know, my first movie, Fat, a Documentary, basically shows what you just said. Ancel Keyes was this bully that came out and did all this stuff. And, everyone just followed along, and people go, well, the big bad food companies, it's like, well, you don't have to buy their foods. The problem I have is most people want to do the right thing. But when you have the government saying, here's the food pyramid, and that food pyramid tells you to go buy this stuff from these companies, it's a boondoggle. I don't know how else to put it. And I know this makes me sound like I need to wear a tinfoil hat, but my God, I mean, people always say to me, last week I took my shirt off around the pool, and the neighbors who, 30 years my junior, they're going, how do you look like? Are you taking hormones? What are you doing? It's like, no, I just don't eat junk. I don't have anything around my waist because I'm not eating the junk. Do you get that? Well, what am I supposed to eat? Not the junk, right? And by the way, don't ask me about my job. when I'm trying to hang out around my pool. Call me during the week. Let's talk. I'm trying to relax. Right? But you see, that's the thing you get into. I do this. That's why I yell into this mic over and over and over again. You've been lied to. Your good intentions have been stolen, right? I'm not saying that because I came up with a catchy fucking phrase, which I did. I say that because it matters, because it really matters. What you put in your mouth matters. Look, I have my own brothers will say, well, come on, Vinnie, we're not you. We're not you. You have the discipline to do the right thing, and we're not you. Okay. Okay, so you're not me. But it doesn't take a lot of discipline if you want to do the right thing, right? You have to want to do it. They've sold us a bill of goods. It didn't work out. They've gotten us addicted to this cheap crap ass food, and we're the only ones that can fix that. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent here, but Ivor, it drives me. Every time we get together, even when we're together, I start yelling at you as if you did something wrong. I remember the last time we were together.
No, you're right. It's crazy.
We were in Houston and we were standing behind a building and I was like, what the fuck is wrong with people? What's wrong with people? And we were just standing behind a hotel somewhere in the rain. I was yelling at you.
I know. And I'm well used to being yelled at anyways. So, and in a much worse way than that. But yeah, it's fucking nuts. I mean, it's complete bollocks, as we say in Ireland and England. It's just ridiculous. But at the same time, as we described there, or I described about how it happened, and Fat the movie, of course, was excellent to describe the whole story. But the reality is, especially for Americans, they should realize it's just business. I mean, business will find a way to make profit at all costs, and that's fair enough. And if people are stupid and gullible enough to fall for the tricks, well, that's just the free market. And I think the only really bad thing is, of course, the revolving door between the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry and all the lobbying of food and pharma in Washington. That's kind of not fair business. That's rigging the game. And there's an enormous amount of that. But you're right. If people want to fix their problems, one of the biggest problems for most people is they're not really sure what to do. Now, there's some people who know what we know, they know what to do, and they still won't do it. They're still eating cream cakes, and they just say, fuck it. Okay. But the vast majority of people in the world are trying to eat whole grains and drink fruit juice and smoothies, and they're putting themselves right down into the fire from the frying pan because they're being told to by the government and by all the nutritionists. And so that's what we need to fix. If you fully understand and realize, if you only ate meat, fish, and eggs and above ground vegetables, i.e. real food, for just a month or two, no major sacrifice, just eat real food for a month or two, and you'll feel such benefits in weight loss, mental acuity, and everything else, then you'll probably say, whoa, I want to keep all these benefits. It's not just the weight loss. I look great. I feel much better. I sleep better. My whole life has improved, and all it required was not eating that shit. That's a good deal.
Yeah, no, you're right. The one thing I'll push back on, you use the word stupid. I would use the word ignorant. I think people would want to do the right thing if they knew what the right thing was. At least if we're not ignoring the facts. And the reason I give them ignorance over stupidity is because we've been sold this bill of goods that is keeping the masses ignorant. Ignorant means to ignore facts, right? And I really think that they've caused us to become ignorant to the facts. Now we have this set of facts that comes in, where when a doctor sees a cholesterol of 250, he'll say, okay, you need to be on a statin. If he sees a cholesterol of 200, you need to be on a statin. And they're not asking the real question. So I want to meander back into that. What did you learn about cholesterol and what happened? Because look, I just got off the phone. I'm going to give you the guy's first name. Mark. No, I'm sorry, Robert. Spoke to a guy named Mark before Robert. Robert's been on the phone with me, excuse me, 3 or 4 different times. Robert's doctor is a vegan doctor. He's a real doctor, but he's a vegan, and the doctor pushes the vegan diet. Robert's cholesterol is not crazy bad. Now, Robert has taken my advice. He's going to go see one of these cardiologists I told him to go see so he can get his lipid, the particle sizes and everything else checked, right? But in fact, he knows when he goes see his concierge doctor who's a vegan, this guy's going to say, hey, you need to stop this. You need to be on the statin and you need to go back on vegetables and you need to cut this out. And I can't give him advice because I'm not a doctor. That's why I sent him to a cardiologist and said, go get all these tests done. Go to this cardiologist. You're going to be fine. Right? What say you about this?
Yeah, Vinny, well, it's a problem again. I'm not a doctor, so all I do, and I always say it, I'm going to share the science and what the science says. What you want to do is your problem, and always consult a doctor. You can go to the doctor all you want, but we just explained how the doctors, unfortunately, are caught in the, I won't say the chamber, I'll say groupthink, and it's owned by industry. So you're going to get sent down the wrong path there with 95% of doctors. And like you say, it's not that they're stupid. They're obviously super smart. They're ignorant. They've been misled. They don't realize they're misled. So for cholesterol just doesn't really mean much at all. It's an industry. The food industry lives off cholesterol and low cholesterol foods. The pharmaceutical industry lives off cholesterol-lowering drugs.
Right.
And everyone is feeding like bloated ticks. They're like parasites. Only they're enormous parasites that kind of run Washington and the FDA. So they're pretty huge parasites. But, cholesterol, a recent study came out to give an example, and it looked at high LDL particularly, and all LDL, the bad cholesterol. And it was in European millimole units, but I convert. So what it saw was that if you're below 200 LDL, which is 200 is pretty high. Over 200 is really high. LDL
Right.
alone, not total. LDL alone, maybe 300 total. If you're below that high figure, there's only a 10% extra risk of a heart problem for each 40 extra that you are. Now, 10% extra risk per 40, these figures are meaningless. Because it's associational. Right. It's not even root cause. It's just associational. So if people first realize the published data shows a lot of the time that there's no risk, a lot of the time it shows the higher cholesterol you live longer, and some of the time it shows apparently a small risk. But the risk is so small, there's no point changing anything based on it. That's the first thing. And then in the same study, it found that people with a 0 calcium score, and that's the scan that shows whether you're diseased or not, it's the best scan in the world for heart disease, quick scan, the people who had a 0 and they had no real heart disease, their LDL didn't matter at all for their risk for heart disease when tracked over many years, even when it was super high. It didn't even show any signal. So it's a useless risk factor. At best, and this is the killer, when it does show a risk, like 10% per 40 milligram extra, that's only because it's an indirect proxy, or it indirectly, the cholesterol gets disturbed when you've got metabolic disease like insulin resistance or autoimmune problems or other things. So even when it does kind of show a risk, it's not because of the cholesterol. The cholesterol is just perturbed or moving a little based on the real problem. So you still got to focus on the real problem. So the whole thing, to an engineer like me, a biochemical guy, when I discovered all this, I just thought, this is so stupid. This whole, ignorant. It's ridiculous. It's a joke.
Right. No, it really is. Now, is there a time and a place, and I want you to think about this because I got to do a quick ad. I know you don't have to think about it, but I'm going to put the question out there and then do the ad. Is there a time and a place where cholesterol could be a problem? Small dense particles, ApoB, this sort of thing. Folks, before Ivor gets to that, I'm going to tell you something that's going to make you healthy. It's a supplement. People always say, Vin, besides the vitamins you sell at purevitaminclub.com, are there any other supplements I should take? The answer is yes. That supplement, olive oil. Now, we just heard Ivor Cummins say that, you know, the companies put all this crap seed oils and everything else in your food. Guess what? Here in the United States, you're able to cut olive oil up to 40% and still call it pure olive oil. That's criminal. But there's an olive oil that I can rest assured is 100% pure olive oil. I drink it every day. I have at least an ounce, if not 2 ounces every day. And that would be Villa Capelli olive oil. They're the longest running sponsor of the show. They've been with us from the beginning. Go get Villa Capelli. When you go to Villa Capelli, if they're out of olive oil, because we run them out of stock here in the United States, put your name on the list. They'll let you know when it's back in stock. I think as of this podcast, I think they're back in stock. So go check it out. Villa Capelli. Promo code Vinnie at checkout will get you 10% off. Promo code Vinnie, V-I-N-N-I-E, 10% off at Villa Capelli. Go check it out now. Let them know we sent you. We're talking to Ivor Cummins. Ivor, is there or are there any pieces and parts of cholesterol where there could be a risk factor to heart disease, period?
Yeah, and I need to go through that because that's a perfect question, because what I went through a few minutes ago was the classic LDL, the old-fashioned measurement.
Right.
And so let's go through the old-fashioned measurements, LDL, HDL, and triglycerides, which you get from the standard old panel. What you have to watch there is the triglyceride over HDL ratio. So let's say your triglyceride is 160 and your HDL is 80. Well, then 2 is the result. And that's American units. It's different in European units. I won't get into that. So you want that ratio below around 1.2. Because if it's higher, triglyceride divided by HDL, if it's higher than 1.2 or so, it indicates you have insulin resistance. So people can see yet again, the useful cholesterol measure from the old-fashioned panel is actually useful because it tells you about insulin resistance. So we're still not at actual cholesterol value. If the LDL in the old panel is really high, you could have familial hypercholesterolemia. If it's really high, if it's up above 250, something like that. And then it's worth looking closely because you can't ignore it. Because generally, people who have very high LDL, it might be perfectly fine, but it might indicate your makeup genetically makes you very susceptible to heart disease. It's not the high LDL that's the problem, but the fact you have high LDL may say you're a certain genetic type with certain traits. So you need to go in and make sure your insulin, your glucose, and all the other important measurements are okay. So that's something I would use with LDL. If it's very high, I'll look more closely at all the important measures.
Right.
But again, the LDL itself doesn't mean anything, but it could mean you're someone who's prone to more clotting activity. So here's another interesting one from Dr. David.
Before you get to that, all right. So let's say let's say you have an LDL of 200, just total LDL. Let's call it 250. Let's make it high. Right. You're saying that the factors, you could have other health factors that coincide with that. So even if you artificially bring your LDLs down with a statin to say 180, you still have those factors in place. Yes, no,
yeah.
Where are we on that?
That is part of the problem for sure. You're kind of moving a deck chair around the Titanic deck. You're moving a number rather than focusing on the root cause, which probably, if you do have a problem, will relate to insulin resistance or clotting factors or autoimmune or immune response problems, many different things. But you're right. Lowering the cholesterol, the reason that statins get some positive result, though in the British Medical Journal a few years ago, they looked over 5 years of daily statin taking from Pharma's own trials. They added it all up and they found only 3 to 4 days of life extension over 5 years of taking the drug. So it's a pretty useless response. But there is some benefit because statins reduce clotting and statins also reduce some inflammation. So they do have some positive effect, but it's not even the LDL lowering. It's other factors that the statins are affecting. So every time it's not the LDL particles, healthy LDL particles, they're crucial. They're from our evolution or the creator, depending on what you believe. They are a central part of our system. It's never them, but if you damage them, by eating a lot of sugar, you damage your LDL, that's going to make it a problem. But it's still not the LDL. It's the fact you damaged the LDL with your diet or something else.
So even if someone's taking a statin, they're not fixing the real problem. They could be lowering some inflammation. They could artificially lower LDL, but if all the factors, if they keep eating the same and keep eating the same crap, the problem remains. Is that what I'm hearing?
Essentially, that is the problem. You might get some benefit, but you're missing the elephant in the room, which is fixing the actual causes of your problem, as opposed to papering over the cracks.
Right.
With the likes of a statin. And as I said, British Medical Journal, for the first time, someone really looked at how much extra life on average you got for 5 years of statin taking. And on average, over 5 years, it was 3 or 4 extra days. And
Wow.
Vinny, that doesn't mean anything.
That's 0.
3 days extra.
That's 0 and negative. Yeah, that could be negative 5 days. It can, I always tell people when you start seeing 2%, 3%, 4%, it can easily be 0 or negative 2, 3, 4%. And that's, I started off in the science world when I was in college. You stayed in it and you became who you became. But that's what you always have to look at when you're looking at percentages and numbers and the whole thing. Whenever you see a slight advantage, there's always a negative advantage. It can easily be in I guess I'm one of those balanced people. I'm always going, in life, there's always a balance. There's always a balance. If it's tilting that way a little bit, it could be that way too. Right. So you got to be careful, folks.
I used to say, Vinny, actually, and it's just a rough guess. If you're eating whole grain breads and all the usual nonsense diets, let's say you're an average person, you're a bit overweight, like the benefit you get from statin, at a rough guess, if you eat one less slice of bread a day, you'll probably get the benefit of the statin. I mean, it's just the benefits are so small. I don't even debate the statins anymore because it's a waste of time because the benefits aren't even worth debating. That's my opinion. I'm not anti-statin. I just think it's a farce to me. Whereas if you do meat, fish, and eggs and above ground vegetables, you cut out all the processed food and the toxic vegetable oils, you do a bit of intermittent fasting, you do training, like you do. Not huge training, bit of weight training, a little bit of exercise, and you put all that together, get your vitamin D up, take magnesium, very important. You just do those things and you get 1,000 times the benefit of a statin. So why do we even talk about statins? What's the point? It's a waste of time.
I got to tell you, I do these phone calls 5 days a week, and I had 4 phone calls today. 2 of them were talking about statin. I mean, they're calling me because their doctor tried to put them on a statin. And I'm talking, some of these people don't, one guy had cholesterol of close to 300, but most people are 190, 210, 205, 250. And, the LDL is not that bad. And the ratio between this and I can't tell them not to do it. I'm not a doctor. I'm always sending them to other doctors.
Just to give an example to people, I'm converting now from the other units, but Dr. Asim Malhotra, people might be familiar. He had a family who were familial hypercholesterolemiacs, and they weren't on statins. I think they didn't want to take them. But when they did the scans on them, and even the invasive, angiogram, where they look at your vessels, they had no heart events in their 50s, late 50s, even though their cholesterol was their LDL was up at around 350 plus. Just the LDL, their total cholesterol was 500 plus. And they all pretty much, when they scanned them, were surprisingly very little heart disease, much lower than the average person. And the record was a guy who had, let me see will I get this right, he had 16 millimole cholesterol, which is 40 by 10. I don't want to say the wrong figure here, but let's say for 600 and something milligram LDL. And I met a guy in Israel in his 40s who was up at 780 LDL milligram, all with clear scans, you know, completely clear. So people need to understand, if it's being a little higher is bad, like they say, right? Well, how can you be 2 or 3 times the average and be there in your 40s, or even the other guy was in his 60s with no heart disease? It's impossible. It proves on its own that LDL is not the problem. The problem is damaging your LDL and like small dense particles that are caused by inflammation. They're small, they're damaged. Or insulin resistance causes your ratios to go off. It's always something else. It's never the cholesterol itself.
Yeah. And look, I'm always trying to explain that to people, because look, and I get it. They go to their doctors and the doctor says, you need to be on the statin right away. It's scary. It's got to be scary to the average person. And I always try, you mentioned that these people's LDLs were 600 and 700. I talk to people all the time on the phone where total cholesterol is 500, 600. And they've been like that their whole life, and their family's like that. It's just a genetic thing. And no one in their family has ever dropped out of a heart attack. And I'm always trying to explain, and this is all anecdotal. These are not studies, folks. I get it. But I'm talking to these people all the time. And they're telling me, keep pushing, keep pushing. And look, if you want to artificially lower your cholesterol, we could teach you how to do that. Right? Dave Feldman was doing that for people at work. The party trick. You want to explain, you explain how that works. Because our bodies I'm always explaining to people, do you realize if you took no cholesterol, your body would make the stuff we needed to live, every cell in our body? Go down that road for just a minute, Ivor, if you don't mind.
Okay, so so the system, like dietary cholesterol doesn't really mean anything, because if you eat less cholesterol, your liver will make more. And if you eat more cholesterol, your liver will sense it and say, oh, I'll make less. So you'll always end up with the same amount of cholesterol floating around, unless you take a drug, because your liver makes around 80% of your cholesterol. So think about this, guys. How stupid is it that every single human on this planet, after millions of years of development, we all make 80% of our cholesterol ourselves, all of us? Why? How could we possibly make something that's a problem? It's absurd. So there's another example. And then if you look at the lipoproteins, and I know that's getting into the advanced cholesterol, but basically the lipoproteins, like you hear about LDLP and small dense LDL, well, the LDL itself, low density lipoprotein, all of these are particles made by our liver that go around in their trillions around our body, and they're like submarines. They carry cholesterol and triglyceride fats for energy and for cholesterol needs around the body, trillions of them all the time. And our liver keeps making them. Again, how could they be bad? They're not, unless you damage them. So it's an energy transport system. So what Dave Feldman showed beautifully years ago, and actually I was the first person he came to, because he knew about me and cholesterol in 2015, I think in Vail, Colorado. And he was all excited that I was coming. I didn't know who he was. And he came up to me and he wanted to meet me. And I was the first person he showed his first 9 data points, where he had made his cholesterol go right up and made it go right down. And he wanted to know, did I think this was real, or was this a coincidence? And I looked at it. It only took me seconds. And I says, Dave, you've possibly hit one of the biggest things in lipidology and cholesterol science of the last 50 years. That's what I think. So he was all excited. But he went on to do amazing work. But yeah, he could basically make his cholesterol go way up or way down. And the funniest one is he went on a keto meaty diet and he made it go up, because a lot of people, when they go on a meaty keto diet,
Right.
their cholesterol naturally raises because, to put it simply, you want more of the cholesterol bolts with triglyceride in them going around because you're using more fat as energy, and it's an
Right.
energy transport system. So you end up getting apparently higher cholesterol, but it's mainly because your body's using fat as fuel. So it's fine. So he put it way up. But you know what he did then? He went on a special diet to drive down his cholesterol, and he dropped his cholesterol by more than a half. I mean, he dropped it down to where the doctor would now be happy. You know how he dropped it down like a stone that would make your doctor happy?
Now, folks, pay attention right here. If you want to go in and make your doctor happy, here's the party trick. Go on, Ivor.
Yep. He switched from his meat, eggs, and keto diet, high-fat, real foods diet, and he switched to basically white bread and processed meat, the ultimate junk food diet.
Yeah.
And he more than halved his cholesterol and maintained it.
Yeah.
So it just shows you it's a farce. And
Yeah.
then when he switched back to the healthy ancestral meats and eggs and keto diet, he went right back up to where his doctor would be terrified.
Yeah.
But you know that the bread and processed meat diet was going to, and his insulin doubled over that period. His cholesterol went right down, and the main thing that's important is your insulin and glucose. And they went straight up, showing you were heading for serious health problems.
Yeah, for type 2 diabetes,
cholesterol went
fatty
right
liver
down.
disease. And what do you remember where his
Yeah.
triglycerides were when he went on the bread diet? His triglycerides had to quadruple, right?
Oh yeah, they went right.
Yeah, they had to go up with the sugar.
They went right up.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're
Of
heading
course.
right. You're heading
Because the liver.
Yeah, the liver's just going to keep producing those triglycerides from the bread because you constantly have a glycogen load, and your body keeps releasing insulin, and it's got to do something with this stuff. It's crazy what happens. Yet you can fake people into thinking, oh, you're being healthy now because you're now eating this way. It makes zero sense. And it's just nuts. It's just nuts.
It's nuts, but the beauty, or not beauty, but the other thing is, Vinny, there's more examples as crazy as that show you it's nonsense to lower your cholesterol with diet. That's a great example. Another one, when you eat these vegetable oils, which are inflammatory and toxic, these polyunsaturated vegetable oils go into all your cell membranes, and your cholesterol particles, the shell of those has fats. And this disgusting vegetable oil you're eating, you know the way they say it lowers your cholesterol? Well, it actually does. You know how it does it? Because these toxic vegetable oils come in and start getting into your cholesterol particles, they actually get oxidized because they're bad news. And that actually tends to make your cholesterol values drop. But it's the worst possible thing in the universe you could do. You're putting in toxic fats. They're causing your body to get rid of cholesterol particles. The number's now looking better and the doctor's happy. In the meanwhile, you're heading towards a heart attack or possible cancers from these toxic fats. And there's more examples of this. Another one is the stanols. You know the plant margarines with plant stanols?
Sure. I know.
But
explain it to the audience.
Well, they lower your cholesterol for the reason I just said, because they're toxic vegetable oil crap. But they sell them, and they got the check mark from the American Medical Association and everything. But the other problem is stanols are toxic to humans. In fact, plant cholesterol, stanols, are so toxic to humans that billions of them come in our diet if we're eating plants. And every molecule comes in the gut, and it goes through a gatekeeping system. And each molecule of animal world cholesterol from meat or eggs is sent through into your body. It's good. Every single molecule of stanol is checked, discovered as an imposter, and sent back away again. Now, some people have a genetic disease, and their hearts, they get massive heart disease. You know what their problem is? Their body is not perfect at removing the plant cholesterol each time. So they get high plant cholesterol in their blood, and that rots their arteries. There's nothing more atherogenic or artery rotting than lots of plant sterols in your blood. So when you eat this plant cholesterol lowering margarine, what you're actually doing is trying to push toxins in your body, and your body responds, and one effect is your cholesterol can lower. And they say it's good. Like, it's nuts.
I want to switch gears a little bit because I've actually had, and I don't have any studies on this, but that's why I don't talk about it much. Vitamin K, when it comes to heart health, I put vitamin K, I put methaquinone 4 and 7 in my vitamin D3 over at purevitaminclub.com. This is not an ad, folks. I'm asking Ivor for his opinion. I also take vitamin E, but I don't take tocopherol. I take the tocotrienol, vitamin E, for heart health. It sounds like I'm on the right page. I saw you. So obviously I'm on the right page with that. And by the way, folks, I do not sell vitamin E at Pure Vitamin. I'm not telling, this is not an ad. I don't sell vitamin E at my company. I certainly do not sell tocotrienol vitamin E. But I take these as additional supplements just for heart health, just as a why the fuck not program when it comes to my own health. It's the same reason I drink pure olive oil, and I like using coconut oil for brain health and everything else. Anything when it comes to vitamin K, especially methaquinone 7, and to lesser degree methaquinone 4, or folks, you may know it as MK7 and MK4, and tocotrienols, or am I just wasting my money? Or as a lot of people like to say on the internet, oh, you're just making expensive pee. Any thoughts?
No, these are fundamental molecules, and there's vast amounts of science. And you know, the vitamin K was the factor X that dentist, brilliant man, not Westman. Oh God, you know, it does a foundation, and he went to Africa in the 20s.
Doctor, geez, if you hadn't said Westman, the Westinghouse, Westinghouse, is that the one where?
No, it's close. We'll come back to it. But Weston Price.
Weston A. Price. Thank you.
Weston Price.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Ooh. Thank you. I'm sitting here going Westinghouse. I need a cup of coffee. Go on.
They're the power generation guys, aren't they? I think.
Yeah.
And so he went and he saw in Switzerland when the lush grasses came in, the green grasses of spring, there were these communities up in the Swiss Alps that basically lived on cheese and milk. They were the most massive dairy population in the universe, and they didn't eat bugger all vegetables. So they're eating all this heart-clogging cheese and milk, and they were incredible health. And he knew from Africa as well, he knew there was something in the dairy products, especially when the fresh green grasses were being eaten by the animals. And that, of course, ferments in their stomachs and makes vitamin K and all. It turned out it was vitamin K2 was the magic factor that he associated with health. And then there's loads of work on this. So vitamin MK4 and MK7, the jury is out, and that's why I always say take both. The MK7 has a lot of data, very interesting data suggesting it's more important. The MK4 is connected to the tocotrienol and a thing called geranyl, which is made in the mevalonate pathway that makes your cholesterol. In there's a crucial thing made, important for hormones, CoQ10, muscle peptides or proteins, and cholesterol. It's all in that pathway that the statin hits. And that GG thing, molecularly, is very connected to the MK4. When you eat MK4, you absorb it, and GG in the body can change it into other versions. So I think the situation, the best we know is MK4 and MK7, it's best to take both. And of course, it's important to take vitamin K when you're taking vitamin D. So it's a great combination. You don't want to be massively taking D with very low K. They kind of interact. Right. So you got it right. I mean, the versions of K, The vitamin D for sure. I like to get it from UV lamps. I made my own rigs, 2 kilowatts of UV lamps. They're actually reptile lamps. I can't promote this, but I bought reptile bulbs because they're so cheap for basking reptiles. And I love them.
How often do you sit?
Shower,
You just stand naked or just on your face and your upper body? What do you do?
All over. What I did was they were around $30 each on special. So I got 12 of them and I got the ceramic mounts and I just wired the whole array myself on an old TV stand, and I used a piece of plywood. So it's kind of pretty much body height. So after a shower, I got a little room beside the shower room. And most times after a shower, I go out with my towel, go into that little room, turn on the couple of kilowatts and drop the towel. And I just bask. And they're not like UV light, like tanning lamps.
Right.
They're really hot and they got lots of spectrum. They've got yellow light and they're basking lamps for reptiles. They got UV, vitamin D, they got infrared. It's a beautiful mixture. If you close your eyes, Vinny, it's like that beach we were on in LA that time. Close your eyes in front of these lamps and it's like you're lying on a beach in the south of Spain.
Wow.
It's sun spectrum. It's beautiful. So I love it. But folks, just to finish on...
Wait, hang on. Folks, you have to realize Ivor lives where the sun never comes out, pretty much.
That's the problem.
Yeah, I spend, when I'm doing my phone calls or whatever, I walk around the neighborhood and then I'll do 1 or 2 phone calls, especially when it's warm out. Once it hits 62, 63, that's warm enough. I just go in the backyard. I always have shorts on. I flip my shirt off and I sit there and I do my work outside in the sun just to get some vitamin D, because that's the best way to get vitamin D. But at my company, and again, this is not an advertisement, but we do the vitamin D3 with MK4 and MK7.
Yeah.
And I take vitamin MK7 on top of that. I just take more of it. Is there an amount? Do we know if there's an amount or,
Well, there's one that's expensive. It's kind of a pal of mine in the States, and I don't want to get into products because you do products, other people do products, but there's one that's expensive, and I can't remember the dose. Oh, it's been several years since I was digging into this. I'd have to check it before I'd say figures. But there's one very high dose one, and it's certainly on the upper end of what would ever be needed. I forget what it's called. I can't remember.
If you remember, I think just email it to me and we'll put it in the show notes. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's concentrated K, and the concentrated is spelled with a K.
With a K. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. And if you look at the dosages he did based on his research, he's kind of a genius fella. He went quite high. Now, he's much higher on the MK4, which is right. MK7, you don't need as much in milligrams. But he went for really high doses. So I'd say that's the upper level, and probably quite a lot lower. If you get the supplement, you're going to be way better off than 99% of people who don't even know what vitamin K is. And as you well know, and you've pointed out many times, magnesium is so important. And most people are probably insufficient in magnesium. It's shocking.
Well, yeah, that's why we made a magnesium over at Pure Vitamin Club. Yeah. And my friend, Dr. Drew Pensky, said to me, he goes, "How did you know?" I said, "How did I know what?" He goes, "How did you know that most people in America are lacking in, the supplement?" I said, "It's easy. We just went and looked, what do people really need? And that's what we make. And that's why we came up with." And then when you start looking at, well, how do you get magnesium in people without getting them to crap their pants out? You put the higher quality ones together and you make a concentrate of that, and that absorbs, and you're using the magnesium and not throwing it. Doing vitamins correctly is not difficult. It's expensive. It's just not difficult. And, when you buy them in a grocery store, you're not getting the same thing. Sorry. It's just not happening.
Yeah. Absolutely. So high quality is key. And then the other thing is, if you're very sensitive and you still have a bit of diarrhea-like effect, I always say to people, eat it after your main biggest high-fat healthy meal. drop it down on top of that meal after eating a big meal, and it's not going to be a problem. But in fairness, if you take the supplement first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, and you've just drunk, like, I don't know, a pint of water and your stomach's empty, it will tend to send you to the bathroom an hour or two later. But eat it on top of a nice, meaty, high nutrient dense, fatty meal, and it's like, it's that easy. Just do it in the evening after your big meal. Yeah.
Yeah, not that difficult to do things right. And if I remember right, there's no UL on K, is there? Not that we know of.
No, it'd be very unlikely that there is, because the Japanese super healthy D, natto, and natto has outrageous amounts of I think MK7, but outrageous amounts, and some of them really like it and eat a ton of it, and all you see is good outcomes. So no, it's like vitamin D. You know, there is some upper limit. Like the guy who is taking probably 30,000 IUs of vitamin D a day is pushing her luck.
Yeah.
But there's no data below 40,000 IUs a day suggesting any problem. And one guy got it wrong, and he ended up taking, I think, 1 million a day. He was out by a factor of 1,000. And he actually presented with problems after a couple of months of taking 1 million units a day.
God.
He had hyperparathyroid, I think, and it had disturbed his metabolism. But when they discovered what he'd done, he stopped doing it, and he recovered immediately, even after months of 1 million a day.
Interesting. Yeah, you know, don't go do crazy things like that. But and also, if you're on Coumadin or any kind of blood thinner, you need to talk to your doctor before you start taking crazy amounts of K, because it could cause some bleeding if, you know. So if you're on medication, don't just take vitamins without talking to your doctor, especially things like K. Ivor, I don't want to keep you forever, man. Is there anything we need to know before I let you go? Anything we're leaving out here?
Well, you know what I'll finish with is a study. I did a podcast or a video on it around 6 months ago, and it relates to vitamin D, but it was one of the most amazing links between vitamin D blood level and disease outcomes or severity. And it was an Israeli COVID study. There were a few studies on COVID and vitamin D blood level, and they all saw if your blood level of vitamin D is high, like yours would be or mine would be, generally they were showing you had 10 times less likelihood of having a severe case of COVID. And the Israeli study was the biggest. And you know what they did? It was beautiful. Some people said, well, you know, when you're sick with COVID and you come to the hospital, your vitamin D might have already dropped right down because you were sick. So what the Israelis did is they looked back at 2 years of history of all the people's measurements, and they knew that that was not true. And what they found, they corrected for everything else, and they came up with a crystal clear conclusion. If you were low vitamin D, which is a lot of people nowadays, we know that, it's a bit like low magnesium, it's a big problem. The very low vitamin D people, I think below 20 nanogram, they had 14 times worse outcomes and mortality. 14 times.
Wow.
And when we said earlier, high cholesterol might be 1.1 times more heart disease, right? 14 times, that's 1,400% higher bad outcomes for being below 20. And people above 40, they couldn't even find anyone with a bad COVID case, even with older people. And a doctor in the States in April 2020 said, has anyone seen any COVID patients with a bad case who are over 40 nanogram blood level vitamin D? He says, because I've been in ICU here for the last month or two, and I can't find any. And the answer turned out to be, after 2 years, you're not going to find any. I mean, are almost none. So it just shows you vitamin D, crucial even for the big issue we had the last few years.
Yeah, our vitamin D sales went off the charts when they started talking about that during COVID, and they're still like that. And I think the reason we sell so much vitamin D is because we sell a high concentration of it. We mix it with Villa CAPPELLI, so we don't have a crap oil in it. and we put methaquinone 4 and methaquinone 7, MK4 and MK7 in it. And it's all there. It's all in one little capsule. And as a matter of fact, I have 2 people in the house right now with COVID. 2 friends were traveling, and they got COVID while they were traveling, and they felt weird. They didn't want to stay in the hotel. We said, just come here. Just come here. So husband and wife, they're staying here in the house. First thing they did when they walked in, I handed them both a brand new bottle of my vitamin D. And I said, here, can we pay? No. Take 3 in the morning, 3 at noon, 3 at night. And I gave them zinc also. I gave them a prescription for zinc. I said, take this. These people have the equivalent of the common cold. Not even that. They're out walking right now. I said, look, get out the house, go walk, get some sun, get out, get some fresh air. COVID was killing people at one time. Both of these people are in their 60s. In their 60s. They're out enjoying themselves with COVID, right? Now I get it. People had different strands and people died of this and that and the whole thing. I get it. It wasn't pretty. But the bottom line was, here we are now, and someone showed up at my house. I took them in because they didn't want to stay at a hotel, and I gave them vitamin D and zinc. Boom. End of story.
Well, yeah, it was such a lost opportunity because I did my first vitamin D podcast, a COVID vitamin D podcast in early April 2020, and it was clear as day. The big risk factors for a bad case were insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes physiology or low vitamin D. And that was out in April 2020. And imagine the world had all said, God, we've got to get everyone to lower their insulin resistance, lower their type 2 diabetes, lower their blood sugar, and get their vitamin D up. It could have divided the impact by 10 across the world. So
yeah,
we missed that boat.
But nobody we were, you got to remember how, you were speaking sense, and the whole world was going, oh, if you got to stand 10 feet from someone else and you got to wear a mask. And we were doing all this stuff. It was like all of this. And I get it. We were all going crazy at the same time.
Yeah.
And Serena kept asking me, what do you think? It's like, I don't think. I'm not thinking. This all seems to be a little crazy to me, and I'm not really sure what it is. And because I didn't know, because Ivor, I don't know about in your country, but here, if you get something from Amazon, leave it on your porch for a week, because COVID can live on cardboard for a week. And when Serena told me that, I went, honey, I don't think so. Bring that shit in. And we can bring that. I don't think COVID is living. The sunshine's going to hit any kind of virus is going to die. Right? Of course. When they drop it off on the step, just bring it in. No, we got to spray it, put it on the table in the back, spray it. I'm like, I don't think so.
Well, it was shown in mid-2020 even. It was already clearly coming out, same as influenza. It's aerosols, which are so microscopic, moisture droplets. They're not even drops.
Yeah.
They're aerosols. They travel through the cloth of masks. They go everywhere. They fill rooms. They're everywhere. The reason you do or do not get it is based on your own immune system state at that given time. And that varies. So that was it. But there you go, Vinny. I don't know. There you go.
Well, let's not get you in trouble again. So.
Don't mention the war, as the British say.
Hang on, because I want to talk to you off the air. Got a question for you. Before you go, tell people where they can find you.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, if you actually just search for Ivor Cummins, you'll quickly hit my YouTube, which I'm big on mainly, and my Twitter @FatEmperor. You'll see my Twitter popping up at the top of the page, and Facebook as well. It'll pop up quickly, and they're mainly what I'm on. I'm on LinkedIn as well, but less so. And metabolicduo.com. Myself and Gabor Doshi, a Hungarian macrobiologist. He's a genius. Worked with him for years. We've done a new venture where we do 2 Zooms a month for subscribers, and we go through all presentations, Q&As, and all the metabolic health stuff and diet stuff. So we started it, and it's going well, and it's fun.
Cool. Folks, that's where you can find the great Ivor Cummins. Cummins is spelled just like the Cummins Diesel Company here in the United States. Ivor is Ivor. So go check him out. You know what to do with us. Before you go to Amazon, go to VinnieTortorich.com. Click through the banner. It puts a little coal on the fire, gets my train down the track, and I'm able to keep the show free for a gazillion years in a row. Also, the PDF, the NSNG ebook is at VinnieTortorich.com. It pops up now. I made it a pop-up because people go, I can't find it. If you just go to my site, you're there for 15, 20 seconds. A little pop-up will come up and you guys can get the ebook. That thing has been handed out well over 300 some odd thousand times. People seem to love it. People have lost hundreds of pounds individually. So we're up to millions and millions of pounds of weight loss of people doing that. So go check that out. On behalf of Ivor Cummins, my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living and do it with enthusiasm.